I wasn't invited to my father's birthday party. Not officially, anyway. The invitation went out to everyone else. My brother, my cousins, the neighbors who used to borrow our snowblower every winter. I saw the photos later, long tables under string lights, plates piled with barbecue, a family legacy banner hung proudly across the porch. Somewhere in the middle of that banner, right below my father's name and my brother's smiling face, there was a small square where my name should have been. Instead, a polite little note read, "Pursuing other paths." No job title, no mention at all. I stood across the street that evening, hands buried deep in the pockets of my worn jacket, the spring air sharp and buzzing with laughter that wasn't meant for me. Through the windows, I watched my family toast to success, to perseverance, to the ones who carried the name forward. Someone clinked a glass, someone else threw their head back and laughed. I caught a glimpse of my mother's pale blue dress, the one she used to wear on holidays, swirling between the guests like a ghost of a time I no longer belonged to. I didn't knock. I didn't wave. I stood there for a while, invisible, a relic they didn't know what to do with anymore. A memory flickered. Me, 8 years old, standing in that same yard, holding my father's hand as he lifted me onto his shoulders so I could see the fireworks above the trees. That boy would have never believed how easily love could be edited out. The porch light clicked on. Someone pointed in my direction, and my brother stepped outside. He didn't shout. He didn't scold. He just shook his head once, slow and heavy, like he was embarrassed for both of us. "You don't belong here, Daniel," he said. "Not anymore." I smiled then, a small, tight smile, and turned away, the gravel crunching under my boots. They thought, losing my job meant losing myself. They were wrong. 3 years ago, things were different. Back then, I was the pride of the family, the first to graduate college, the one who made it out of our small town carrying something more than a tool belt. And a handshake. They threw a barbecue when I landed my job at a tech startup in the city, clapping me on the back like I'd just crossed some invisible finish line. I can still see my father standing by the grill, beer in hand, beaming as he told anyone within, "Earshot, that's my boy, he's going places." And for a while I believed it too. I worked brutal hours, skipped holidays, made the 2 a.m. drives home just to catch Sunday breakfast with them before collapsing back into my week. I sent postcards from every city I traveled to, small efforts to keep the ties taut, believing that work and distance could never erode what was supposed to be permanent. I thought effort could anchor love. But the distance didn't appear all at once. It crept in quietly, like rust threading its way across a truck's frame, invisible until it wasn't. At first, they missed my calls now and then, easy to excuse. Then the family group text started to thin out, my name dropping lower and lower in the thread until it disappeared entirely. Invitations to birthday dinners or Christmas gatherings somehow got lost. Excuses piled up like brittle leaves. Too busy, too far, too much going on. By the time our startup was absorbed by a larger company and I found myself among the many laid off, there was no one left I could even call to tell. When I finally did, managed to get through, the responses came flat and clipped. "Sorry to hear that. Hope you land on your feet. Maybe it's a sign to come back home and settle down." The warmth that used to flow so easily between us had dried into something transactional, obligatory. One night, about 6 months before the birthday party, while cleaning my apartment, I unearthed an old shoebox of keepsakes. Nestled among faded Polaroids and ticket stubs was a letter, handwritten on thick stationery, the ink slightly smudged from where a heavy hand had pressed too firmly. It was from Mr. Miller, the CEO of one of our biggest client accounts. He had written after a particularly chaotic rollout, thanking me for my calm under pressure, for holding the line when others faltered. "You have a rare steadiness," he wrote. "Don't let this world make you smaller." I sat there for a long time, the letter resting against my palm, the steady pulse of his words threading into my chest like a faint but certain heartbeat. Back then, I had thought loyalty guaranteed belonging. I had thought showing up, working, hard, loving well, those were enough to keep you tethered. I folded the letter carefully, smoothing the creases, and placed it back into the box. Some things, I was beginning to understand, were never really yours to hold in the first place. The night after the birthday party, I couldn't sleep. The images kept playing behind my eyes. The clink of glasses, the way my brother's face tightened as he told me to leave, the heavy silence when my father turned away without even looking at me. Around 2 a.m., I found myself scrolling mindlessly through social media, the way people do when they don't want to sit alone with their thoughts. That's when I saw it, a photo posted by my cousin Lisa. It was from the party, a groupie, shot under the glowing backyard lights. Everyone was there, arms thrown around each other, smiling wide for the camera. My father, my brother, my mother, cousins, neighbors. And just above the caption, "Family, stronger than ever," was a comment thread I wasn't meant to see. Someone had asked casually, "Hey, where's Daniel these days?" Lisa had replied, almost too quickly, "Oh, you didn't hear? He got fired last year. Some shady business at his old job. Kind of embarrassed the family. Best not to bring it up." I stared at the words, blinking hard, half expecting the screen to blur them into something else. But they stayed, crisp and merciless. Shady business. Embarrassed the family. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It wasn't distance or awkwardness or the slow drifting apart that life sometimes brings. It was a choice. A deliberate rewriting of my story, crafted to protect their perfect image. I sat back, the pale light of the screen washing over the chipped furniture and empty walls of my apartment, and felt the weight of every sacrifice I had made pressed down on me, every missed holiday, every overnight drive, every phone call left unanswered when I needed them most. Somewhere, rattling softly against the drafty window, the night wind whispered against the glass, and I remembered the letter from Mr. Miller, still tucked away in that battered shoebox. A man who had known me for barely a season had seen more worth in me than people who had shared my entire life. The anger that rose wasn't loud or chaotic. It didn't clamor for revenge. It was colder than that, sharp and settled, like the edge of a blade drawn in deliberate silence. They had chosen to forget me, to shame me into absence. Fine. If they wanted a story to tell, I would give them one, but it wouldn't be the one they wrote. It didn't take long for the real reason to surface. A few days after the party, I got a call from Mrs. Langford, the old neighbor who used to slip me extra cookies when I was a kid. She danced around it at first, asking how I was doing, mentioning the weather, saying she missed seeing me at the gathering, but her voice cracked when she finally said it. "They didn't want any complications, dear," she murmured. "You know, with your father's award and all." Award? I sat up straighter in my chair, heart thudding against my ribs. Mrs. Langford continued, oblivious to how every word she said carved deeper into the wound. The city council was honoring my father at the upcoming Civic Legacy Gala, a Lifetime Achievement Award, a public commendation for raising a family of achievers, pillars of the community. It was a perfect photo opportunity, a carefully curated narrative. And me? Unemployed, tainted, a blemish they couldn't afford to showcase in their portrait of perfection. I thanked Mrs. Langford for the call and hung up, my eyes lingering on the cracked kitchen window where the rust-colored sunset bled across the horizon like an old wound reopened. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about misunderstanding. It was about optics, about preserving the illusion, about making sure the family brand stayed untarnished, even if it meant cutting out anything that no longer fit the image. I thought of my brother's tight smile, my mother's averted gaze, my father's silence as I walked away. All of it, so fragile under the thin veneer of pride, clinging desperately to appearances that couldn't survive even a whisper of imperfection. A different kind of anger took root inside me then, not hot and reckless, but cold and deliberate, settling deep and sure. They had traded blood for applause, loyalty for legacy. Let them have it. I wasn't going to fight for scraps at their table anymore. I was going to build my own. Opportunity didn't announce itself with a crash or a bang. It came quietly, almost politely, the way real chances often do. About a week after Mrs. Langford's call, I was sitting at my kitchen table, skimming through half-hearted job listings. That felt more like pity offerings than real opportunities when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something, maybe stubborn instinct, maybe the faintest ember of hope, made me answer. Daniel. Smith? A gravelly voice said. This is Richard Miller. I straightened in my seat, the name sparking immediate recognition. Mr. Miller, the former CEO of Horizon Systems, the man who had once sent me a handwritten letter, back when people still noticed the quiet ones who held the line. I heard about the shakeup at your old company, he continued. Word gets around. It's a damn shame. Good people getting tossed aside because a spreadsheet said so. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed quiet, letting him fill the space. I'm building. Something new, he said. East Point Industries. Smaller, sharper, built right this time. No politics. No climbing over each other just to stay afloat. His voice warmed slightly. I need someone steady, someone who knows how to navigate storms without making them worse. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the moment slowly sinking in. I remembered you, Mr. Miller said simply. How you handled the chaos, the mess, the things nobody wanted to touch. You didn't panic, you didn't grandstand, you just did the work. There was a pause, then a faint chuckle. I'll send over the offer details, but if you're in, I'd appreciate if you kept it quiet until our formal launch next month. I want to make a little noise at the right time. When we ended the call, I sat there for a long while, staring at the pale sunlight slanting across my battered kitchen counter. No, cheers, no congratulations, just a stillness settling into my bones, solid and sure. I wouldn't crash their perfect little narrative. I wouldn't fight to be invited back into rooms where they had already locked the doors. I would wait. I would build. And when the moment came, I wouldn't ask for permission. I would arrive. The Civic Legacy Gala was held at the Old Town Convention Center, the kind of place where the carpet always smelled faintly of dust and coffee. No matter how, many times they cleaned it. Banners hung from the rafters, photos of my father, smiling stiffly in black and white, standing next to achievements he claimed and milestones he wore like medals. A lifetime of service, the sign read, etched in heavy gold script. I arrived early, slipping through the crowd in a dark suit no one recognized. I wasn't listed as a guest, but no one questioned a man in a tie carrying a clipboard and moving like he belonged. From a spot near the back, I watched the char. My brother was the first to take the microphone. He beamed. My mother dabbed her eyes with a gum, except one. They didn't mention me. Not once. Not in the opening video montage, where old family photos flashed. It was almost impressive, the thoroughness of my erasure, as if they'd rehearsed it, polished. It made it airtight. Around me, people clapped, murmured approval, lifted glasses in toast. I stood perfectly still. I just needed to wait. The truth, I had learned, didn't require a spotlight. It just needed the right moment, and that moment. The room hushed as the MC tapped the microphone, flashing a grin so wide it almost looked painful. And now, he boomed, a very special guest we'd like to recognize tonight. Please join me in welcoming the newly appointed CEO of East Point Industries, Daniel Smith. For a second, the silence was absolute. Frozen forks, half-raised glasses, wide blinking eyes, then heads turned, almost as one, searching, and I stepped forward from the shadows. No fanfare. No rush, just quiet steps on aging carpet, the soft brush of my shoes filling the empty beat their applause had forgotten. At the podium, the light hit me full on, hot and heavy. I saw my father shift in his seat, confusion flickering across his face like static. My brother's smile cracked at the edges. My mother clutched her napkin a little too tightly, the fabric twisting in her fist. I adjusted the microphone with a slow, deliberate hand. Good evening, I said, my voice steady, carrying easily across the stunned crowd. It's an honor to stand here tonight, surrounded by so many familiar faces. There was a ripple, a cough, a shifting chair, then stillness again. I didn't look directly at my family. I didn't have to. Their silence carved a path straight through the center of the room, more deafening than any shout. I spoke briefly, calmly, about East Point's mission, building something new, something real, something that valued integrity, not just as a word on a plaque, but as a way of living. No revenge, no pointed accusations, just the truth, humming beneath every word. When I finished, the applause came late, polite, uncertain. Some clapped out of habit, some out of confusion, a few out of genuine surprise. It didn't matter. I hadn't come for their applause. I came so they would see that the sun they tried to erase had not only survived, but had risen, higher and stronger than they dared imagine. I left the stage with no backward glance. The moment wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was enough. I didn't stay for the rest of the speeches. Instead, after stepping off the stage, I moved through the clusters of guests, offering polite nods, brief smiles, exchanging handshakes with strangers whose names I wouldn't remember. Word traveled faster than footsteps. Whispers curled through the room like smoke. That's Daniel. CEO? Really? I thought he was gone? Near the buffet table, beneath a chandelier flickering with the weight of too many years, a small crowd formed. Someone, a man I vaguely recognized from church picnics, stepped forward. "Congratulations," he said, voice a little too loud, a little too eager. "I guess things worked out for you after all." I let the words settle in the space between us before answering. "They always do," I said, and offered a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Another woman chimed in, one of my mother's old bridge partners. "Your family must be so proud," she said, glancing sideways at where my parents sat stiffly at their table, hands folded, faces pale. I turned, slowly, letting my gaze drift over the room, over the people who had once celebrated my every step, and later erased my footprints without hesitation. "My family," I said, my voice even, "taught me something important." Chairs creaked. Glasses paused midair. They taught me that belonging isn't given. It's built. Brick by brick, act by act. Loyalty isn't something you inherit. It's something you prove every day, in the small ways that matter when no one's watching. Silence, thick and heavy, settled over the crowd. I didn't need to say more. I didn't need to name names, recount betrayals, or rehash forgotten conversations. They knew. They all knew. I thanked the man, the woman, anyone within earshot, and offered them a parting nod. The truth had been spoken, not in accusation, but in certainty. Sometimes the cleanest cuts left no blood at all. I stepped out into the night without looking back. The air was crisp, the stars sharp against the dark velvet of the sky, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, my chest felt light, unburdened. Behind me, the gala continued, muffled, now like a distant memory. Laughter drifted out in broken waves, applause sputtered uncertainly, and the heavy doors swung shut with a sigh as I crossed the threshold into something wider, quieter, freer. In the parking lot, the cars gleamed. Under the streetlights, perfect rows of polished ambition. I moved past them without hurry, my reflection gliding across their glossy surfaces, a ghost they couldn't erase. I paused at the edge of the lot, just for a moment. From here, I could still see the building, bright and gaudy against the night, trying so hard to hold on to its narrative of perfection. I let my gaze soften, let it all fade into something distant, something small. I didn't hate them. That was the final surprise. I didn't even pity them. I simply let go. I had spent too many years trying to fit into spaces that shrank me, trying to earn pride from people who only valued mirrors that flattered them. Now, I had my own space, my own sky, my own story. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing the old creased letter from Mr. Miller, the one I'd carried with me tonight like a quiet promise. "You have a rare steadiness," it read. I smiled, tucked the letter deeper into my jacket, and turned toward the open road. No fireworks, no grand farewell. Just the, and for the first time,